Hello everybody and thanks for joining me. Today I'm tying a CDC Hackle variation on the classic Diawl Bach. The hook I'm using is a size 14 nymph hook from RX. I'll tie this pattern from size 12 all the way down to size 20 or so. The thread I'm using is UTC 70 in red, and for the tail on this fly I'm going up market and using some Coq de Lion. This is light Pardo, gorgeous feathers. For the rib on this fly I'm using some Opal Mirage tinsel, also from UTC. This is the small size. For the body, I'll be using 2 strands of peacock herl wrapped up to make a nice fuzzy iridescent body. To make the hackle I'll be using a split thread technique and a single CDC feather, and to make the cheeks, some split jungle cock. I've got plenty of split jungle cock, this cape has pretty much had it. Finally, to finish off the head, a little bit of varnish. So let's get started. I'm going to cast on my thread a little ways back from the hook eye and carry it down the length of the hook shank, laying down a single layer of thread. Now when you look at the materials list for this pattern, you might be thinking Coq de Lion and CDC, those are dry fly materials. Well, I beg to disagree. I think that the Coq de Lion gives a really nice little bit of extra speckle and sparkle to the tails on this fly, and CDC can give this wonderful, wet, mobile, buggy look to wet flies and nymphs. Well worth experimenting with. Speaking of tails, I've taken a pinch of my Coq de Lion fibres and tied them in to make a tail about the length of the body, and carrying that up using touching turns with my thread all the way up towards where I'll be starting the thorax. I can trim off the excess, grab the couple of little bits I missed there, and then secure down the butt ends. I like to keep my Diawl Bachs with a fairly skinny underbody. I don't think that they benefit from having lots and lots of bulk. The Chironomid midges that I think that these mostly represent, they're quite skinny, and I don't think that adding too much weight and too much bulk does you any favours. Here I'm tying in my ribbing material. This is the length of that Opal Mirage tinsel, and I'm tying it in on my side of the hook shank all the way down to the base of the tail. I've secured that out of the way in my materials clip. Now I've got 2 very nice long tapered strands of my peacock herl, and I'm tying those in from the tail and working up the length of the body. Peacock herl is quite a fragile material, so what I can do is put a little dab of varnish on and just wait for that to go slightly tacky. You can also use super glue, but I inevitably seem to stick myself to the fly, whereas with varnish it just gives a little bit of adhesion and a little bit of extra strength. Now keeping those parallel, I'm going to wrap them, nice touching turns coming forward, and this is going to build up a nice smooth tapered body. This is why it's important to use fibres with a little bit of a natural taper to them. You can see it's skinnier towards the tail and a bit bulkier up towards the body. If you're doing a really teeny tiny pattern, you might only need 1 strand, but here I like having a bit of extra density from the 2 strands. Now for the rib, I'm going to aim to make about 5 or 6 wraps of this tinsel, and I'm just working my way forward, nice even turns, and this is going to add a bit of sparkle and a bit of segmentation to the fly. I'm happy with that, and I've reached the thorax, so I'm going to make a couple of tight turns over, 1 in front to lock it off, 1 more over the top, and then come in with my scissors and trim away the excess. The next thing to add is going to be our CDC, but we've got a little bit of prep work to do first. I'm using a split thread technique here, and this is why I like using UTC 70 thread for this. The fibres lie very nicely parallel, so it's easy enough to use a dubbing needle and just split those fibres of the thread, and you can run it down. Make sure that the thread's spun flat before you try this, and you can make a little dubbing loop on the thread itself. This helps reduce bulk, especially when you're using fine materials like CDC. Here I've loaded a Petit-Jean clip with 1 feather's worth of CDC. This is just a natural grey colour, and I'm going to tie that in. Here I'm using my finger to spin that up, and then using a combination of thread spinning and more finger spinning, we aim to make a nice little dubbing brush like so. Here I'm sweeping those CDC fibres backwards, and I'm aiming to make a nice wet fly style hackle Some of the fibres might come loose, that's okay, I've tied in a small excess. And I don't want this to be a hugely bushy hackle, but I'd like it to be a little bit sparse and ever so mobile. With the hackle tied in, the next job is going to be to add our wing buds, and for that I'm using this split jungle cock feather. This one came off the cape perfectly. Sometimes you need to encourage that split a little with your scissors, but here all I've had to do is trim off the fuzzies from the bottom, and then tie it in on top of the fly with a few tight turns, and I'm aiming to make a tent-shaped arrangement over the top, and this gives a little bit of a profile to those wing buds. You can see they're sat nice and evenly on both sides, so I can trim off the excess and then build up a little head with my thread. Having that extra pop of yellow on the side of the fly I think also acts as a nice hotspot for the trout. To secure the head and secure the thread, I'm going to add a little dab of varnish, and here's a view of the finished fly. You can see it's got that nice soft mobile hackle, little pop of colour from the jungle cock, a nice red head, and that sparkly iridescent body with the opal tinsel. It's a really nice variant on this classic fly. Give this one a go. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.